The house slept, but Oliver's mind operated at the strict frequency of twilight. He wasn't just an inhabitant of that space of straight lines and plush carpets. He was the true architect of the routine. From atop the bookcase, he observed Thomas, his human, who insisted on filling the room with noisy TV streaming. For Oliver, the sound was an unnecessary assault on his refined hearing. The first and most crucial rule of the unwritten feline manual is the preservation of sacred silence. Humans have a strange obsession with constant noise, ignoring that true comfort lies in the absence of sonic friction. Oliver stretched his front paws, feeling the texture of the wood, and blinked slowly. That blink wasn't a mere biological reflex, it was a diplomatic sign of truce and affection that Thomas rarely reciprocated properly. The human usually responded with loud exclamations and abrupt movements, breaking the harmony of the moment. Oliver longed for the day when human communication would become as subtle as the slight raising of a tail. He descended from the shelf with the lightness of a feather, without making a single sound. He walked to the sofa, sitting at a strategic distance of 2 hand spans. He didn't want to be crushed by a suffocating embrace. He simply wanted to coexist in the same calm time zone. Respect for personal space was the ultimate test of wisdom that Thomas needed to pass, but which he stubbornly failed almost every night. The morning sun cast a perfect rectangle of warmth on the kitchen floor. Oliver sat right in the center of the light, beginning his rigorous morning grooming routine. Each lick was a calculation of symmetry. That's when Thomas made the second classic mistake of the day. He extended his open hand towards Oliver's exposed belly. A grave error. For a cat, showing its abdomen is the ultimate proof of trust and vulnerability, never an open invitation for clumsy massages. Oliver tensed his muscles and emitted a slight kick with his paw, without using his claws, merely as a warning of a violated boundary. The unspoken rule dictates that the top of the head and the cheeks are the only free zones for petting. There reside the aromas that integrate the feline into its environment. When Thomas finally understood the message and shifted his focus to the base of the ears, Oliver relaxed, allowing himself to close his eyes. The purring began softly, like the motor of a perfectly preserved antique appliance. That sound was the greatest compliment a human could receive, though he didn't understand the gravity of the privilege. The calm, however, was short-lived. Thomas stood up abruptly to get the phone, breaking the magnetic field of tranquility that Oliver had taken minutes to build. Humans change focus too quickly, a chronic impatience that felines observe with deep, silent disapproval. The kitchen held the greatest enigma of the coexistence between the two species, the food bowl. Thomas looked at the container and saw enough food for another 12 hours. Oliver looked and saw the harbinger of disaster. There was a hole right in the center of the mountain of grain, revealing the white ceramic bottom. For Oliver, the visible bottom of the bowl triggered an ancestral scarcity alarm. It didn't matter that the edges were full. The feline rule is clear. If the center is empty, the bowl is technically deserted. Furthermore, pressing his sensitive whiskers against the high walls of the bowl caused genuine discomfort, something humans called whisker fatigue, but which for him was merely ergonomic torture. Oliver sat beside the bowl and fixed his brown eyes on the back of Thomas's neck.
He didn't meow.
Meowing was a vulgar recourse, reserved for extreme emergencies. The power of the gaze was far more refined. Thomas felt the psychological pressure, looked back, and sighed, muttering that the cat was spoiled. With a slight shake of the food bag, he filled the gap. Oliver waited for the human to move away before taking the first bite. Eating in the presence of others required a state of alertness he preferred to avoid. Satisfied with restoring order to the food supply, he walked to the living room with firm steps, ready to oversee the next stage of the day, knowing that his persistence had saved the house from an imminent famine. The afternoon was drawing to a close, and the atmosphere in the house was changing. Thomas opened his laptop on the living room table, engrossed in his work. Oliver knew this was the perfect time to apply the last and most complex rule of the feline handbook, the intrinsic need to participate in everything that drains his human's attention. If Thomas gazed at the screen with such devotion, that screen was, by definition, the most important place in the world. Without asking permission, Oliver jumped and deliberately walked across the keyboard, typing an incomprehensible sequence of consonants before lying crosswise on the warmth of the device. Thomas laughed, trying to gently move him away. But Oliver shrugged. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a declaration of priorities. Humans spend their lives focused on shiny glass boxes, forgetting to observe the dust dancing in the sunlight or the subtle movement of the curtains. By lying there, Oliver forced Thomas to slow down, to look at the soft fur that begged for a light touch, to breathe at the measured rhythm of nature. Thomas finally gave in, partially closing the screen and resting his forehead on the cat's head. In that brief second of silent connection, without screens, without noise, and without misunderstandings, the secret rules were suspended. They were no longer necessary. The human had finally learned his lesson, and Oliver could close his eyes for his well-deserved 14th nap of the day.